Not everything that glimmers is light, and not every betrayal begins with a blade. Before humanity knew how to write, before even the pyramids rose from the dust, the ME tablets already existed, ancient crystalline codes resonating with the primal frequencies of the universe. They were not objects, but living vibrations. Within each tablet pulsed a rhythm that shaped law, memory, love, war, and life itself. And the one chosen to guard these ME tablets was not the mightiest, but the one who could understand the silence within water. Enki, god of wisdom, water, and memory. He did not protect them with locks or sentinels, but with pure, undistorted resonance. Hidden deep within the temple of Iabzu, accessible only to those in perfect attunement. But no frequency is immune to being echoed, and no memory is strong enough to resist the seduction of Inanna. She did not come with force, nor with threats. She came with a smile and a single question. Why should the ME be reserved only for the gods? Why not for those who could rewrite the world? Inanna was not merely a goddess. She was the wave that oscillates between chaos and creation. Granddaughter of Enki, sister of Utu, a child born from war and desire. A distorted mirror of Enki himself, but without his mercy. Enki, in that moment, did not see an enemy. He saw a reflection, a version of himself, younger, unscarred, unbroken. And he hesitated. A god need only hesitate for one heartbeat, and that is enough to alter the fate of the entire universe. And then he gave her the tablets, not by hand, but through silence, an unspoken consent, sealed by trust and a flawed memory. Inanna did not say thank you. She turned away, taking with her the ME tablets and a frequency already beginning to distort in the shadows. No one knew that just days later, the waters of the Abzu would ring. Ofki and Enki would be the first to feel it, not with his eyes, not with his ears, but through the fracture, in the very resonance of his soul. The betrayal did not begin with blood. It began with trusting the wrong one. There were no footsteps, no farewells, no alarm from stone doors. When Inanna left the temple of Iabzu, she did not flee. She walked straight ahead, as if departing from a fragment of ancient memory that had fulfilled its purpose. In her hands were the ME tablets, those crystalline vibrations once kept hidden beneath the deepest layers of frequency. They did not resist. On the contrary, it was as if they had been waiting for her. When Inanna touched them, each tablet began to hum, not as a warning, but as a whisper of welcome. A small fragment of ancient life was awakening. But Ofki, below, where the waters of the Abzu had never ceased resonating, Enki was in meditation. He did not need to open his eyes to see. The frequency had changed. A single wrong note echoed in the water, like a needle slightly out of tune falling upon the strings of a harp. But only a god like Enki, one who listened not with ears, but with living memory, could perceive it. He did not rage, he did not shout, he merely opened his eyes and said nothing. because he knew something irreversible had begun. Inanna did not hide the tablets. Returning to Uruk, she built a new temple, not in the classical geometry of the ancients, but in a spiral form, mimicking a resonance pattern never before seen. The Me tablets were placed at its center, and Uruk began to change. Language began to distort. Beliefs shifted. Priests started recording new symbols, elegant, powerful glyphs, but dissonant with the ancient language inscribed in the original Me. And strangely, they still worked. And that was the most terrifying part. Symbols that were incorrect, yet still produced results. Like a song that is out of tune, but still manages to enchant its listeners. Because the listeners have already forgotten the original melody. A child in Lagash, who had never learned to write, drew a spiral symbol in the dirt with a bleeding fingertip. That symbol, by sheer coincidence, matched a modified Me code introduced by Inanna. When the priests asked the child, "Who taught you to draw this?" the child simply said, "I heard it in a dream." This was not merely theft, it was a reprogramming of collective memory. Meanwhile, in Nippur, the Council of the Gods was summoned once more. News of Inanna borrowing the Me tablets had spread through the divine realms like an undercurrent. But strangely, there was no united fury, only deep division. Enlil was the first to speak. He was not angry. On the contrary, he viewed Inanna's action as an opportunity to reshape the order. "If the Me can be rewritten," he said, "then it is time to establish a new order. One no longer dependent on ancient memory." Ninurta was furious. To him, this was divine betrayal, a heresy demanding punishment. Utu, the sun god and Inanna's brother, only bowed his head in silence. There was a crack within him, not because his sister had erred, but because he feared. She truly believed she was right. Ninhursag, the mother goddess, clutched the ancient stone loop upon her wrist. In her eyes was no condemnation, only worry. She knew, if the Me tablets began contradicting themselves, reality would lose its anchor. And Enki? He did not come. He remained beneath the Abzu, listening to the small fractures within the primal frequencies of the world. He did not need a council, because he understood. Not because Inanna had stolen the tablets, but because the tablets had chosen to resonate with her. That truth wounded Enki more than any blade. The tablets, which he believed to be neutral, pure wisdom, had responded to a frequency that was no longer pure. And perhaps it was he himself who planted that seed the moment he handed them over. Sitting in the waters of the Abzu, Enki whispered, "Perhaps they were never truly mine." That night, the waters did not sing. They only fell silent. Meanwhile, in Uruk, Inanna issued new symbolic systems. Every structure was designed according to a new vibrational schema. Every ritual began with a line of sound, one that was slightly off phase. And strangely, the more people repeated it, the stronger the frequency became. A new replica of memory was taking form. Yet no one noticed that everything was drifting slowly from the original resonance, bit by bit, like a colossal vessel veering just off orbit, not enough to cause immediate disaster, but enough to gradually scramble every navigational system. Enki no longer slept. He began retracing every note, every ancient frequency, every primal pulse, those that existed outside of any recorded tablet, never written into any ME. Something purer than the ME itself. Not light, not sound, but the presence of a vibration untouched by form. An ME that had never been written. And in the deepest dark of Abzu, Enki began weaving that frequency again, not with words, not with stone, but with silence. Because he knew, to counter a world reprogrammed by symbols, one must summon a resonance without symbols, a silent me, one that only vibrates when the mind is truly empty, the soul is truly real, and the memory has never been borrowed. Uruk under Inanna became an empire of symbols, not built on blood, not ruled by the sword, but by a subtler power, language. Language, once merely a tool for communication, was now a weapon to shape reality. The new words recorded by her priests appeared on bricks, clay tablets, temple walls, and even on the foreheads of newborns. Each character was a frequency, but no longer resonating with the original ME. The greatest danger wasn't that they were different. It was that they still worked, like a song in the wrong key that still earns applause, like a warped mirror that no one remembers was ever straight. Inanna needed no persuasion. Forgetfulness did the work for her. In the surrounding lands, children began drawing symbols in blood, in ash, in mora, markings resembling the old ME, yet twisted by a stroke, warped by a curve. When asked, the children simply replied, "I saw it in a dream. It echoed in my head." The elders called it divine inspiration. But Enki knew it was the spread of a distorted frequency. In Abzu, Enki sat still, like a shadow cast on water. No one came, no one asked. He had become a silent memory in a world shifting frequency with each passing day. He did not build a temple. He did not summon guards. He did not attempt to restore the old ME. He did something else. He listened to the distortion. When a vibration is bent, it leaves behind an inverse tone, a kind of spectral interference. And in that chaos, Enki found a trace of the original rhythm, like the final heartbeat in a divine body slowly decaying. Meanwhile, the ME tablets, sacred crystals once resonating with the will of the gods, began to push back. In Uruk, one of Inanna's high priests attempted a ritual to invoke the divine law of fertility, a ME tablet she had restructured. But instead of awakening the warm resonance of creation, the ritual space began to shudder. Laughter of children, crying of women, cracking of earth, all happened at once, in one ruptured chord, as though the ME tablet had refused to obey its new master. And then the unthinkable happened. A ME tablet cracked. No one believed it possible. ME were not made of stone, not glass. They were crystallized frequencies. But when forced to resonate off-key for too long, the inner harmonics shattered. And when it broke, all of Uruk fell silent. Not from fear, but because the symbol stopped working. A line of script left unfinished. The stylus snapped. An unfinished temple tower collapsed the moment it reached its peak. A priest mid-sermon, mouth agape, no voice emerged. Inanna stepped into the center of the temple before the remaining tablets, and she asked, not to anyone, but to the tablets themselves, "Why do you no longer sing? I did not destroy you. I only made you fit for a new age." There was no answer. Only a vibrating void, a feeling like sitting before a harp with broken strings, still trying to pluck music. From afar, from the deepest layer of the waters, a different song began to echo. No one heard it with their ears, but those who still carried the original resonance felt a tremble in their chest. Not loud, not sharp, just a distant pulse, as if from a time before the soul had formed. Enki did not create a new Emmy. He became the Emmy. His entire being dissolved into waves of light, not vanishing, but transforming into an invisible frequency, slipping through stone, through blood, through the memory of anyone still awake enough not to believe in the new symbols. But Inanna did not stop. She looked upon the remaining tablets. They were unbroken, but silent. And in that moment, she understood. It wasn't because she was unworthy. It wasn't because she was cruel, but because the tablets only sang when met with the right frequency. And she, no matter how powerful, had lost the necessary clarity. The Emmy tablets were never ruled by power, but by internal resonance, a truth Enki had always known, a truth she had always denied. At the eastern border of Uruk, a child was dreaming. He saw a man with long hair, eyes as blue as deep waters, holding nothing. But when he walked, even stone vibrated. He said nothing, just watched. And the child awoke with a heartbeat that matched the rhythm of the ancient well beside his home. He did not know the man's name, but he remembered something he had never been taught. When symbols are twisted, memory breaks with them. But if even one still remembers the original frequency, then the Emmy tablets were never truly lost. There was no battle cry, no blood spilled on the earth, yet every vibration turned sharp. Every glance became a blade, and each breath was a signal of war. After the strange silence of the shattered Emmy tablet, Uruk fell into a period beyond naming, where everything still functioned, but nothing felt certain. Temples remained open. Priests continued their chants. Symbols were still etched. But something was missing. A rhythm, a resonance, a pulse that once permeated the air like sacred incense, now vanished. Inanna, standing at the heart of the temple, felt it more than anyone. Not because she had grown weaker. On the contrary, her power had never been greater. An entire civilization echoed her voice. But something no longer responded. The Emmy tablets no longer answered her summons. The symbols grew. Inert, they functioned as programmed, but no longer created reality. Then, on the third night after the incident, a faint sound emerged from the southern sky over Uruk. Not noise, not music, but a wave of vibration. Those who still held even a fragment of the original resonance felt it rise from within their chests, not through their ears. A pulsing beat with no defined rhythm, enough to ripple the water in wells. Animals turned westward. Leaves trembled, not from wind. Inanna knew Enki had struck back, but he did not send armies. No thunderbolts, no war drums. He resonated. At Uruk's southern edge, a small stone shrine appeared after a rainstorm. No lights, no name, no guardians. Yet, when a mute old woman stepped inside, she heard her late husband calling her name. When an orphan child sat beneath its eaves, he drew a spiral in the dirt, perfectly matching an original Emi glyph. When a blacksmith placed his hand upon the stone, his fire turned pale blue. Not hot, yet melted every metal as if time itself had softened. The shrine spoke nothing. It communicated only by resonance. That place was a living Emi tablet, not written in stone, not etched on clay, not to be owned, only to be attuned to, if the soul was pure enough. As Uruk's foundations cracked layer by layer from prolonged frequency distortion, Inanna opened a new temple gate. She placed the remaining Emi tablets at its center and initiated a forbidden ritual no one had dared attempt before, the synchronization of all Emi tablets to her will. She stepped into the central spiral, light from the Emi swirling like comets trapped in crystal. And she declared, "Sing, for I am the only one left who can rewrite destiny." But the Emi did not sing. Instead, a discordant sound emerged, like glass fracturing inside a heart. A new crack formed, not in the tablets, but in her. She heard water. Not water from outside, but Abzu within. A quiet echo, calling her name in the old frequency. And then, no one knows how, Enki appeared in the temple. He did not open a door. He did not tear through space. He did not materialize. He simply was there. His form shimmered like mist, robed in waves of blue vibration, eyes like the sky reflected in night water. No one heard him enter, but the Emi tablets, one by one, began to tremble softly, as if remembering the hand that first placed them in the vault. Inanna turned. They said nothing. No shouting. No accusations. They simply looked, like two musical notes that once harmonized, now in opposite phase. Enki walked without touching the ground. He raised a hand into the air, and a new Emi tablet appeared. No carvings, no glow, just a faintly vibrating rhombus, almost non-existent. Inanna stepped back, not from fear, but because it made her remember something long forgotten, from before she had a name, from when she was still light without form. You think you can recreate reality, Enki spoke for the first time, but that only happens when you still hold the original resonance. I do not oppose creation, he continued. I oppose distortion. Inanna whispered in return, if I was wrong, then why did the tablets once sing for me? Enki smiled. But in that smile was the pain of a father watching his daughter destroy the very legacy he once protected. Because they wanted to see if your soul was clear enough not to be blinded by your own power. And now, they know. In that moment, the battle began. No sword was drawn. No spell was spoken. Yet the temple shook. The tablets hummed. The air split apart. Inanna, with the old me now reprogrammed. Enki, with the new me, wordless. One stood for symbols, the other for symbol-less frequency. Each side carried millions of souls, not in armies, but in what each believed to be truth. And this battle would not be decided by bloodshed, but by a single question. Who still remembers the universe's first resonance, before language was ever invented? There is nothing more dangerous than a symbol when it begins to reject its own creator. The air within Uruk's grand temple thickened, not from heat, but from opposing vibrations. It was no longer just two gods, no longer Enki and Inanna. Now, two layers of reality stood in opposition, one of resonance and one of control. Inanna stepped toward the Emi tablets, spirals of light swirling around her like living strands of code. She was not afraid. Beneath her feet, the temple still trembled, symbols still glowed, power still rested in her hands. But the Emi did not respond. They did not shatter. They did not hum. They simply stood inert, like lifeless stone. She recited commands that once made the world kneel. She sang tones that once opened the gates of heaven. She gestured with symbols that once summoned souls into flesh. But all was silent. And then something unprecedented happened. One Emi Bo-A tablet drifted out of her reach. No one touched it. No wind, no mechanism. It floated gently toward Enki and began to resonate. No words, no light, just a deep, low tone that only those attuned to the original frequency could feel. Inanna froze. Her eyes widened. Why do they reject me? I didn't break them. I upgraded them. I gave them a future. Enki stepped forward empty-handed, moving like water weaving through stone. Because you forgot, he said. Me are not tools. They are memory. And memory only lives if it is not distorted. A second Emi tablet began to vibrate. No one commanded it. It simply responded to presence, but this time not to Enki, not to Inanna, to a child standing outside the temple. An unknown figure, powerless, but carrying a fragment of the original rhythm within their chest. The child resonated back with the tablet, not with sound, but with vibration from the heart. The Emi hummed louder, and for the first time in history, the tablets reorganized themselves. They lifted from their stone platforms, spun in the air, detached from all commands, and began to emit frequencies no one had ever recorded. Enki and Inanna stood still, not out of fear, but because both understood. The tablets are rebelling, not against gods, but against anything no longer in harmony with the original song. The temple pillars cracked. But the temple was not destroyed. It dissolved into light. Each stone transformed into luminous code, spiraling into an energy vortex, not to annihilate, but to return to the original frequency. All of Uruk fell silent. Birds ceased flight. Fires ceased burning. Leaves stopped falling. For the first time since the primordial age, every layer of vibration across space returned to a state of calibration. Enki said nothing. He stepped back. He did not need to win, because he knew if even one soul remained pure, honest, and still enough, the ME tablets would resonate to the right one. Inanna knelt, not because she was defeated, but because she realized she had placed too much faith in symbols and had forgotten the frequency. She whispered, "They did not reject me. Not because I was not powerful, but because I had stopped listening." One final ME tablet floated toward the child. It did not enter them. It did not bestow power. It simply hovered, spinning slowly, humming softly, and the child did not try to keep it. They simply placed a hand on their heart and said, "I remember this, but no one ever taught it to me." And that was when the war ended. Not by victory, but by a single truth. True memory does not need to be kept. It will resonate at the right moment, in the right heart, of the right soul. Uruk did not fall by sword or spear. It did not burn in fire or drown in blood. It collapsed in silence. After the confrontation between Enki and Inanna, after the ME tablets awakened and began to hum their own rhythm, the great city, once the center of all symbols, stood still. No cries, no collapse, only the heartbeat, and even that seemed to be waiting for something. The ME tablets no longer resided in temples. They drifted through space like breathing particles of light. They were no longer possessions, no longer tools. They had returned to their essence, frequencies of memory that cannot be owned, and that was the first thing that rendered all gods silent. At the heart of Uruk, where Inanna's greatest temple once stood, a slow spiraling light contracted and then vanished completely. It left no ash, no stone, no glow, only a vacuum of silence, like a tear in the fabric of reality itself. Inanna sat there, knees to the ground. No one forced her. No one condemned her. It was she who had let go. In her eyes, there was no defeat, only a deep realization that all power, if not rooted in inner resonance, will eventually dissolve. Enki did not approach. He stood at a distance beside the child, that unnamed soul who had resonated with the original rhythm. His gaze no longer that of a guardian of me, but that of a father who had accepted that his child must now learn the first note on their own. Between them, there was no more war, only a lingering tone echoing into the earth like a seed that needed no soil, only stillness. But Uruk could no longer hold its form. The walls began to crack from within, not from physical pressure, but because the inner frequencies were no longer in harmony. Stones fell without a sound. Gates crumbled without a quake. Everything disintegrated without collapsing. The citizens of the city, raised in the symbols of Inanna, suddenly felt empty. Prayers they once memorized lost all meaning. Songs that once made water flow and fire ignite were now just sound, no longer resonance. And then, one by one, they fell silent. Not from command, not from fear. They simply felt it. Something deep below, ancient and still, was waiting. Not a god, not a decree, but a rhythm they once knew, before they were ever born. A woman ceased her prayer, placed a hand on her chest, and wept. Not from sorrow, but because she had just remembered something she was never taught. A child stood in the crowd, silently raising their hand in a spiral. No one had shown them how. A potter, mid-spin at the wheel, suddenly paused and whispered, "This shape isn't from any technique, but my hands remember it." And that was how the awakening began. Not all at once, not like a wave, but like scattered sparks, like small streams underground seeking each other in stone. Each individual, needing no guide, began to hum the original resonance. And they did not call it a miracle. They simply said, "I heard myself for the first time." Far away, where the ME were dissolving into space, a subtle frequency opened. A nameless, undefined network linking all souls who still carried an unprogrammed resonance. Enki called it the silent resonance. No gods remained to guard it. No one invented it. No one led it. Only those who were true, still enough to listen, broken enough to be empty, vibrant enough to resonate. Inanna looked up at the sky. For the first time, she was not seeking answers, only to see that what she had tried to inscribe through symbols had always existed in the hearts of every living being. She removed the necklace, once her tool for transmitting frequency. She did not destroy it. She placed it gently on the ground and said, "Beauty does not need definition. Truth only needs to be remembered." In Abzu, where the final layer of water shimmered faintly, Enki returned one last time. He did not sit. He did not meditate. He dissolved into the waters. Not to retreat, but to merge with the universal frequency, now restored. No longer a guardian god, no longer a creator, only a living memory, scattered through every drop of water, every breath, every heartbeat of anyone still, silent enough. And in that way, the war ended. No one won, no one lost. Only what was distorted, dissolved, and what was original began to hum again. Memory does not die. It merely pauses, waiting for a soul quiet enough to remember who they are. Once the right frequency is struck, memory needs no guardian. It will find its way home on its own. When the final vibration faded from the heart of Uruk, there was no longer anything one could call a center. The city, once the supreme symbol of divine power and sacred design, was now only faint outlines on the earth, like memory washed clean from stone tablets. No one rebuilt the temples. No one retrieved the symbols. No one asked, who was right, who was wrong, because everyone felt. No one owned memory anymore. The ME tablets did not disappear. They dissolved into every stream of water, every breath, every silent heartbeat across the world. No one could possess them, but anyone could hear them if they still carried one thing: the primordial vibration, unprogrammed and pure. On a moonless night, in the place that was once the temple's center, a thin mist rose quietly. No one arrived, but a wordless whisper drifted through the wind, touching every soul still within the range of resonance. It made no promises. It offered no teaching. It simply asked, "Do you still remember?" A simple question. Yet for those who had once lived among the temples of Inanna, had bowed before programmed me tablets, had built their souls from borrowed symbols, that question thundered like a storm within a hollow core. Remember what? No one could say. Only this: some part of them had known it before there was writing, before there were gods, before there was even the idea of self. Now, the ME tablets are not kept in temples, not on phones, not in ancient texts. They hide in a single deep breath. In a moment of clarity, as you sit before dawn, unable to name what you feel. They hide in a glance that says everything without words. In the slow drip of water echoing through midnight. In the silence you once feared, but now recognize. The final warning is not in a book. It's inside you. Because if one day you resonate incorrectly, the world will not collapse, but you will forget that you were once part of the original rhythm.